Hi guys, it's Horatio. This video isn't necessarily about how to draw expressions, but more how to think about the ways that your characters emote and how that differs from character to character. So, let me get my tablet out. I'm reading off of a script that I wrote, but I'm also going to be doing some drawing and pulling up images that I already made for this tutorial, so uh, stick with me here for just a second. Okay, so we all know some very basic expressions like, let's see, this big, like a smile, um, frown, kind of a pout, and so on. But these expressions start to lose their potency if they're only connected to generalized emotions with impersonal and external origins. That probably sounds a little confusing, but trust me, it will make sense once it's broken down a little bit more. Um, let's start by establishing some general emotions and or states of emoting that we can expand upon. So the ones that we're going to work with here are neutral, joy, anger, sadness, fear, and blush. Now, blush isn't really an emotion, but it you can have a variety of different emotions that are being conveyed through some sort of blushing expression. So that's why I have it here. Obviously, there are more than just these, but this six will suit our needs for now. Um, Before getting caught up in these other emotions, you'll want to determine your character's neutral expression. So the neutral expression is going to be their default state of being. Maybe your character is consistently melancholy, or maybe they have an ingrained zest for life, or they could be reserved and not project much emotion at all. Whatever ends up being their neutral expression, treat it like their overall feeling toward life. Their neutral expression should communicate to others what their base personality is. So now that your character has a neutral expression, that's when you can start to break down their other expressions. So let's make another image here. Um, Within each general emotional state, there are more specific iterations of that parent state. So, for instance, let's take joy as the parent state, right? Um, we can break joy into different levels of joy. Um, so, let's see if we had, an arrow going up and down. Down here, joy is at its most mild, and here it's at its most extreme. So a mild version of joy could be pleased. Something good happened today. Maybe you saved a couple cents on, some fast food or something. Um, and you have a more moderate laughter. You saw a funny meme online or somebody told a kind of funny joke, whatever. It's not the, greatest moment of your life, but you're happy, you're having a good time. And then at the extreme level, maybe you have overjoyed. So maybe you just got proposed to from the love of your life. something like that. Um, so we have this scale of mild to extreme versions of whatever the parent um, emotion or state of being is. But another thing that we can consider is more nuanced versions of that parent emotion. And these can kind of combine other emotions with the parent emotion or are just considering more complicated variables when we're talking about the parent emotion. So, for example, something like smug. Smug would be a positive emotion, essentially, because it is, there's an element of happiness, but it also can be a little mean. So you're not necessarily combining it with anger, but there is kind of a component that could be related to anger that's being thrown in with joy to create the smug emotion. Another version that you could have could maybe be bashful. Ugh. So, maybe someone gave you a compliment and it's embarrassing, but you're also happy about it, so you're bashful. Um, so once you've broken down or branched off from the parent emotions, you'll have a huge variety of expressions to work with. Um, that said, you shouldn't assume that every character will express this breadth of emotion to the same degree or in the same way. So this is where you're essentially taking your character's neutral expression into account. So think back to your character's neutral expression and determine how their default state of being is going to affect the way that they emote. Um, so I'm going to bring up a set of expressions here. Okay. Um, so here's a character whose expressions are relatively subdued, similar to his neutral expression. Um, he's laid back, but he also tends to be kind of exhausted. So these factors manifest in his expressions with tired, droopy eyes and a slack mouth. And these attributes kind of carry throughout most of these. Now, you're going to have expressions where, okay, yeah, he doesn't look as tired or have as slack a mouth. But overall, if you take in all of these expressions, there is a consistency to them that ultimately, ties back in with his neutral expression. Um, let's open up another one. So here's a character with very clear expressions that are more often moderate to extreme in intensity, even for emotions that would be considered mild, like pleased. So, for example, if we go back to the first guy, his pleased, doesn't seem like too much of a change from his neutral state. This guy, his neutral state is already like around the moderate level of intensity because of those, bright, wide eyes. So even a mild emotion like pleased is going to come across as more intense with him rather than another character. Um, he's unconcerned with how his emotions may affect others, so he doesn't hold back with expressing them, almost like a child. So, he's often got really wide open mouth and will be crying very openly or will be furious very openly. Everything is open and clear and unapologetic, basically. Let's go to another one. This character, unlike the last, expresses even extreme feelings with subdued expressions. So, like the first character we looked at, this one has less intensity, but unlike the variety that the first had, this one's range is also smaller. He's laid back, but also secretive, so it's harder to read him. So here, almost every expression includes eyes that look essentially closed, aside from a couple of these: overjoyed, smug, tearful, furious. But for the most part, everything is, you know, in line with each other and very similar in its intensity, despite the intensity of the emotion. Um, so if you want to consider, if you want to put it on a chart, um, let's try it this way. Not only do you have intensity going up and down, but you also have, uh, going left and right, um, the the range of the emotion. Um, wow, this is not the best graphic here, but hopefully it serves its purpose anyway. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is you can have, um, someone can show a variety of range, like this fella here. He's, his expressions are pretty clear, even though they're more subdued. Whereas this guy, the range is very small, um, in comparison. So that's that. I think this is the last example. Um, so here's another character with a wide range of expressions, as well as a wide variety of intensity. So what I especially want to point out about this character is how his sad expressions all seem to be held back compared to the others. Um, so where you can see, him getting, really over dramatic with the overjoyed and furious and nervous and stuff like that. The ones in this column are kind of, they're kind of strained, they're held back. Um, he's usually over dramatic and obnoxious, uh, but this character is afraid to let others see him when he's vulnerable, which results in him bottling certain feelings up and not expressing them except to those he's very close to. So that's something that's really important to consider is, how often is this character going to be likely to fully express their emotions to people? Who are they surrounding themselves with? Um, so to continue on this train of thought, another example of this selective dampening of emotion, or expression rather, could be a character who grew up in a strict and harsh environment and learned to hide all emotion except for anger. So maybe being seen sad or afraid would have made them appear weak, and showing any kind of friendliness or kindness would have made them appear soft. So this character can still feel a wide range of emotion, but their environment and the people they grew up around have affected the amount of those emotions that they make visible to others. So they most often appear cold and unfeeling, unless they're mad, which is when their expressional intensity rises. Um, Another example could be maybe your character's motivations determine the way they emote because they need to be seen as open and compassionate, even if they're actually very cold and calculating on the inside. So, as you can see, things can get very complicated with duplicitous characters, and you may need to have multiple expression charts for a character like that to show the difference between their mask, so to speak, and their true self. Um, Anyway, to summarize, these are the factors that you want to consider when determining a character's range and intensity of expression. So I'm gonna write these down just to make it extra clear. Um, so the first one is their backstory. That could include where they grew up, who they spent time around, cultural norms, things like that. Uh, their outlook on life, which is often informed by their backstory, how they want others to perceive them, any insecurities they may have, and let's see, mental illness or other neurodivergent states that could affect how they express themselves. That's a little bit more complicated, and you'd want to do a lot of research into that, but I think that it's definitely something to consider. And then any sort of external substance. So that could be medication or some kind of other substance use that could alter their expressions or their, range or depth of expression. So there are probably a lot more factors that I didn't even think to list, but this hopefully gives you at least a solid groundwork to build upon so that each of your characters can emote in a way that is unique to them. Uh, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!